All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going to talk about the Bach chorales. So this is very kind of maybe seem a little bit basic and textbook-like, but well, at some point it was a good idea, I think, to talk about that. And I'm quite aware that everyone has maybe various stages in understanding four-part harmony. And me myself, well, I learned this quite early on. Actually, after I started composing for some time, instead of getting a composition teacher, I had a harmony and counterpoint teacher. When you go to, universities, you are sort of forced to do it on curriculum. And it's sort of something that's just been around for a long time, and we can't just kind of ignore how important four-part harmony writing really is, and how much it sort of affected everything almost that came after Bach, in many ways. And of course, as we're looking at things like theory, of course, these systems were created much later than Bach sort of started writing this kind of music. And to understand, there's also various systems, and I know, for example, I think Franz is used to the German system that I started with too, which is basically called the 1 is the tonic, 5 is the dominant, and you have the 4 is the subdominant, and then you have the parallel, so like the parallel to the tonic, which in English system is then a 6, like in C major, that will be A minor. But these systems were basically invented much after this sort of was written. But that is what one has to understand about that, I think, is that the theory is not sort of an invention. It's the music is the real thing, and the music in itself is self-explanatory.
May I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
May I ask a question?
Naturally.
It is everywhere you read that this system were invented later, but how can it be that people adhered to them so well, and as if they have learned it, and if they didn't learn it, and if they didn't invent it, what were their rules and guidelines then?
Well,
because Bach taught this stuff to his sons, for instance.
of course.
How did he do it?
Oh, well, we have theoretical systems, of course, date back further. It's just not exactly the systems that we are used to. I mean, in strong detail. I mean, and this, what I wanted to explain in a way is that one has to see it as self-explanatory. So let's say that you have a language, and then you can analyze the grammar of it. So in a sense, this is very much the same thing as what we're doing in English class or German class, or we're learning grammar in a sense also, right? Is that maybe a way, because it sort of it has its own language, and it's done in that way, so we can basically learn a behavior. We can learn this sort of behavior of writing music. That's how I would say it. But you always, of course, yes, I don't know the details of that, but I guess the concept of a tonic dominant, this is, of course, goes way back before Bach too. They had sort
for instance, how people use the diminished 7 chord. It seems like as if you have to learn this somehow. It's not so natural to do that, quite out of your stomach. And after a while, people did that.
Yes, of course. But that is a little bit to do also with the diatonic scale, where you do have the, obviously, I mean, that is a, because as soon as you do have the F in the diatonic scale, and then that's the 7. Anyway, let's move into this. I don't want to dwell too much on the very kind of concept about it, but I do know, of course, that for some people this can seem very boring or strange. And also why composition students are studying this, and when it's maybe you're actually writing some 12-tone music, or you're writing more something like something completely different. So why do we need to bother with this? And it can create an irritation in composition students. I don't know how it is everywhere in the world, but I mean, at least in Europe, I know particularly for composition students, there's such an extreme emphasis on counterpoint and harmony. And of course, now we're talking about Bach chorales, which sort of is the core of it. But you can go back too, and you can also study the counterpoint of, for example, Palestrina. That's another very interesting one. But today it is Bach that we're going to look at, our favorite. So let's just state the obvious here. So a chorale is basically the name of several related musical forms that originated it's basically something that came out of the Reformation, and Luther himself, as I understand, was very keen on song, and he composed many songs himself. So in many ways, the Reformation from the Catholic Church had tremendous influence on music history, maybe more than spiritual guidance in many ways, because it changed so many things. Where before Reformation, you weren't really using, there was much more limited what you were supposed to do with church music, which was kind of the main employer and the kind of main vessel for development of music. As we know with Bach's work, sometimes they don't have to follow certain melodies. It's most important in the Reformation. You go from having the power and the authority of the Catholic Church to the word, so to speak, which is as we know it, collection known as the Bible. And so as long as you basically used biblical words and so on, it was quite all right within the church. So it opened up a lot of a big change. But here we go again. Of course, as anyone knows, then later on, of course, Catholic Church changed a lot too. So it's not quite what it is today. But in all church services, we know we have these chorales that we sing, right? And these were set and kind of had a certain style to them, and was a part of the new Lutheran kind of practices. And Bach have done so tremendously many harmonizations of these. And of course, you must understand, it's a little bit the sense that in the church service, there will be songs. So you will sing them, and that could be sang just the melody. And you had organ, or you could basically have some kind of accompaniment to it. But this tradition, which we now, it's so like, as soon as you talk about 4-part harmony, you cannot escape the Bach chorales. It's like the kind of art thing that we're talking about, almost end of story in that sense. So the Bach chorales this is the foundation of so many things. Even if you look at, Chopin talks about Bach. If you read the book about Barrios by Richard Stover, I have it here actually, because if you look in the index, there's just so many times that Bach comes around and is mentioned. And Barrios said that was his main inspiration, basically, and main source of. And so said Chopin, and so said so many others, Brahms, etc. No, but what we're really talking about is to really understand the foundation of basically any Western by Western classical music, and the foundation of any work by Bach is to understand these chorales. Let's have a quicker look here. So there exists now 400 that we know. It's quite something. Of course, they're not very long. So what it is you're taking this Lutheran chorale, which is then the soprano voice, all right? And then you're setting this in 4-part harmony with, this is what we called SATB, so soprano alto, tenor, and bass. All right. Now we're going to first just have a look on a few of those, but we should also mention already now that it goes further than that. We also know that these chorales, basically the organ player, were meant to do these chorale preludes. It's a North German tradition at that time, that in the service there is this prelude, choral prelude, that goes before you start, and that again, this is a kind of a fascinating room for the composers and the organists, and for Bach in particular. This was basically mean that every time they had such a service, there was room for him to play quite extensive prelude that could just vaguely be reminiscent of those chorales. And when it comes to Bach's work, we of course everyone knows, you know, the well-tempered clavier and the cantata, so etc. But it's very, very large part of his work are these choral preludes, and he also has something called choral partitas. But these choral preludes are almost as intricate and interesting as the well-tempered clavier, as a matter of fact. And the first choral prelude he wrote, I think he was only something like 15 years old when he wrote that. So this is something he basically spent his entire life doing. It was very, very, very important. Okay, as we mentioned here, the SATB, pre-existing hymn tune allotted to the soprano part. All right. A little bit details here. Text treatment, homophonic. That means that they're singing the same words as they go along. So, you know, this is so everyone can follow that. Also, the lay visitors of the church can sing along and understand the words. Okay, I mean, if you want to look at this document, you can also go all over the internet and find out information on your own. But okay, now this is of course a course for guitarists. So today I would like to show a little bit like what happens if we actually, instead of doing it like this, which we're used to analyze it in a 2-stave setting where you have soprano, alto, tenor, bass, right? Just a little bit for fun, we're going to now look at that, what that looks like on guitar. So some of this is basically becomes very difficult to play, but I would encourage you, if anyone has this PDF now, and if you have some time, it's quite nice to even just slowly work yourself through these, because it's on your own instrument rather than something else. I'm just gonna tune my guitar here in a second. So if you do have a guitar, feel free to take it out at this point and just feel what is that feeling like to play. Obviously, there could be various fingerings. I didn't, you know, put that in today. And we should not also, this is now put in one guitar, but of course to truly experience this, other than of course singing, would for example be with a guitar quartet. All right, and the linear concepts become so very, very obvious. I mean, for example, that very first minor chord. If anyone wants to get a little bit more, if you feel really lost with the system 6, you know, 1 6, then there is a quite nice link here, and in that PDF, you can literally just click there, and here you go.
Hi.
You
We're
will
now
see
ready
the
to take
video.
our next step in.
So this is if somebody's really a little bit lost with that, there's a very nice detailed video here. I mean, it's always, or if you notice and you just really feel unfresh, but so, which he explains in the video here also, is that you may think that this is going to be in E minor, but actually as we kind of work our way through here, we realize quite soon that it's actually in G. And so this is the E minor chord. For example, I can play it here, and then I can actually, oh no, maybe better here, sorry. And then the next, all right, so let's forget about this little middle note for a second, but basically this is a G chord with, in first inversion, right? So that's, in this system, is a 1-6. Right, very beautiful chord. And what are these little middle things here are literally, you can, of course, in analysis, go in detail and explain, for example, that this then what that becomes. But in most cases, we can just simply not bother too much with that, because this is just what is known as a passing note. Okay, this is passing through. Don't even bother so much about it. It's, you know, it's just the, and then same. And then what is that? It's a C chord, right? So then this system and this key G, that is a 4. So, all right, and then A minor is of course 2. And then here, of course, I can't really play it unless you maybe, maybe I real stretch, maybe, but you can, like the violinists do, you can just go, then you also get a sense of the feeling. And then here it's not written out because, you know, it could be quite nice also to, if somebody wants to do it themselves, but we had it already. This is just a 1, it's just a G chord. Again, F sharp is just a passing note, and then again 6 with a, and then we have C, which was 4, and again, but in this case, of course, you can also say that here you have C, and then these, yes, are passing notes, but in this case, you could also really say that it turned into a D7 chord, right? So systems are always ambiguous. So you can literally also think of that as then a 5-7. And then you have 1, again, passing note, and then this beautiful 4-3 suspension. And in this case, it truly is a suspension because it's been prepared. This in sometimes people don't go in that such detail, but you can also go in that detail. If it was by leap, it would have been an appoggiatura. So this sort of wordings we like to use, but here you see the G is anticipated and was prepared. And of course D4, we recognize these, of course. The C here in this case is a pass. Here we don't, it actually becomes the 7th in the D, right? So again, we would probably write out that here. So it's more than just a passing note in a sense, but again, it's completely ambiguous. So it's not very good on guitar, but as guitarists, I think this is nice. We shouldn't be afraid to just, you know, because it's not a concert. It's just changing how we feel about the fretboard, and now really experience the power of these so-called Bach chorales, which are so beautifully a combination of the vertical and the horizontal, because every single line here, we can just hear how every part is almost could be a chorale in itself. This is the bass line. All right, now let's hear. Of course, we all know who have done this a little more detail that typically the alto voice is the least interesting one, but not always. But let's see how that one sounds. not bad. But you see, the alto voice typically gets, that's quite typical, that it has a lot of repeated notes. That's just sort of the nature of it. And then the tenor voice. Oh, and here there is, I actually played it wrong. I'm very sorry. Now we have it on recording. I completely, I think I played that wrong, because this is, no, it is right, sorry. It's just, I wrote it wrong. But it's very difficult to do this on guitar when you only have one stave. But this, yeah, this is the tenor voice. Although they looked at this was the tenor voice going over, but it's not. So one more time. Yes. It has that little do-dee-do-dee-a-dee-dum. All right, and now that, and those were all just separate voices, and you hear how incredibly perfect melodies they also are, in a way. And of course, they're the main melodies. Actually, maybe the least interesting one. So all these are very perfectly. So of course, we understand how this way of now kind of, he basically created a way how harmonies could, this is sort of ultimate polyphony in a way, because there's ultimate sort of independence of each voice, but they completely form sort of like almost like the concept of a perfect society or something like that, where they can form this sort of beautiful harmony. So this is one, if anyone wants to go, there's a link here. You can see here. Now we're going to look at yet one more chorale, and we're going to actually do the whole one. But of course, we realize here they are, of course, tremendously short. And then there are different verses, of course, that you can, anyone who's been to such a service, you have the books and you open and you sing them with different words. So already there, of course, as you're singing in the church and they have instruments, there's a lot of room already there for variation, improvisation, etc. All right. Well, actually, let's hear how that sounds like this one, just to orientate ourselves a little bit. I'm also going to warn you that the theory in this one is a little more complex. And I also wanted to show here an example of ambiguity in the systems, that there are different ways to do this. But let's just hear this song. I'm going to click on that link. Take a very quick, just a little pointer here, what is quite interesting, as you see the alto voice here, and we all know that girls can, that doesn't have to be that, especially some alto, and I mean this is just a C, it's not tremendously low, but that they can sing low too, and of course an excellent tenor can go up to the G here. Often this is where it all goes very wrong, because the tenors are, it's very difficult to sing tenor. But here this alto voice is below, this is a C and this is an E, so actually here the tenor voice is going higher than the alto voice, right? Let's see that. All right, beautiful. Actually, we can maybe hear that again, because here we really have voices. This is, of course, when I'm playing this on guitar or on piano. This we almost have to then imagine a little bit. Let's see what it can be. Let's hear that one. Let's go a little more. Yeah, the tenors there in that choir too, they were a little weak in their voice there, but it's a very beautiful effect, and they did sing it, of course, very well in tune. Here you hear there's also organ in the background, of course. Makes it so much easier to sing than if you, whoops. Okay, let's now go back to our lovely PDF, wherever that, close that. Okay. So here we go. In a second, we're also going to, there's many interesting aspects here, but maybe again, let's just, because this is a guitar course. By the way, I noticed a mistake here that I made, but this could also have been a find, guess the notes. It happens to be there was just 3 Ds here that they were just so generic. I forgot to even put it in. Let's see, this one is more difficult to play, and some of it is impossible. One could actually play it if we tuned to D and G tuning, for example. Then we can actually play it, but that requires too much mental ability for a Sunday. So we're just gonna keep it with regular tunings. And then here I cannot, right? So I did it a little bit. But if I had G tuning, I could actually D. I can do it, of course. But then, for now, I'm just gonna play like this. And this is where my missing note. And this is really gorgeous. But again, it's just very nice for us guitarists to just fiddle through this, although we can't even quite do it. Again, we just have that same very thing. These are like the chorales are like little magic boxes, and it's like the very DNA of all of Bach's music is sort of right in here, concised. Right. So again, we're going to just. I think in the world that can write such a good bass lines like Bach. If anyone
May I ask a question? Yeah. In the guitar version, in the second last bar, there is a fifth parallel, but it is in principle in different voices. Does this count as a fifth parallel?
No. Could you
the F sharp, from F sharp to G sharp and C to D together? They
where
here.
There's no fifth parallel here.
Is not?
The D is already there.
No, the F sharp C is a fifth in my understanding, and the G sharp and D is also a fifth.
Yeah, but a D, first of all, this is an augmented fifth. But the D is already here. So there's no parallel motion. The D is already in the Ultravoice, is D, D. Then that is not the part. You don't find, what you do find though, is parallel fourths. We can see the hallway here. From the end here. Right. But again, it's actually augmented, so it doesn't count, I think. And that is also, this is where it's what I talked about. I pointed out before about the tenor voice. You see, this is actually the tenor voice here. And here right now, this is a little bit, if you wanted to make a really proper addition, you would use arrows here to indicate that you have actually changed the voices. But let's see here. Oh, you mean this? No, but this is augmented fifth. Otherwise, if this would have, if that would have been a D sharp, then it would have been a parallel fifth. But also, what you see here, in this case, also perhaps because of that reason, the tenor, you see here, the alto actually goes here. So that is what has to be understood.
So that if you change the voices, it does not count as a parallel fifth.
No, there's no parallel motion if the voices are not going parallel. And in this case, the alto voice is going actually down.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But I think in any, you mean that...
Only to know.
Yeah, this is the issue, of course, when we do play this on piano or guitar, that we can't. On guitar, to some degree, you could imagine different strings. As we know, on the organ, you could play this on different manuals, right? And that would then, if we now go back to this version, you would probably easier play it, or maybe I should ask Kenny, he used to play, you played organ, that you would then probably use, you see, this maybe be played easiest in two manuals, right?
On the organ, of course, you've got the pedal board, so the organ arrangements, you'd probably play the lower notes with the pedal and the upper three notes wherever you want it, either on one or two manuals.
Right. But of course, once the voice does it, and this, of course, if we really fully wanted to understand that, as a guitarist, it would be better to play the guitar quartet. All right. But I think we still get, you know, and especially this section here, of course, we have to really, I mean, it's surprisingly beautiful, I must, but it's, of course, really terrible to play, you know, and because of the high position, even with this nice frets, I cannot, it gets so out of tune. So what I wanted to touch briefly, this is a little bit more advanced, but this is, we should take a little bit look at the analysis. So yes, we are in C major. This is a 1 chord that we have there first. This is a G. There's nothing strange about that. So that's just 1/5. So far, so good. Now, this is a D chord in C, which we know then is actually the dominant of the dominant. Right? And this is a passing note, but yes, it creates a 7. You see here, this is an example of a very detailed analysis where they also analyze, they give the passing notes functions too. Right? But the ambiguity of here, which is basically the same, to be honest, but if you see here, there's 2 options when we go to the C chord here, which we knew was a 1, but obviously having a B flat, all right, in this, and also this is a little bit unusual, but you have a D here, right, going there, but the B flat really points that this is now a movement out of a key, meaning that we're actually in F, where C, but you could just write it like this too. It doesn't matter. This is, again, it's the different ways to look at the same phenomena, let's say. There's different explanations to the same thing. And you have a few of those here. We were talking about 7 before here, it's a little 7. But of course, here again, is this 5? Yes, but it, as you notice here, it continues, is basically in G here. So then we shift the entire thing, that this is 1 now. So G is 1. All right. So, but this is not some kind of rocket science in many ways. Here too, in the end, you see, so this is 5, but you could also just pretend that you're still in the same system, and then it's 5 of 5. All right. So these are the ambiguity. In this, we don't really know, I think, how they thought about it. There is such a thing as known as the even may have been that this, not everyone even thought about the dominant of the dominant. They may have thought of all of these, including this, as a kind of just shift out of the key. Like it's even known in textbooks, a little modulation and a mini key. So this, so there's not one way to explain with either systems. So that's, again, I think that's the beauty of this, that we're not actually so much trying to just follow some rules. We're trying to actually figure out what are the mechanics in working here. What is going on? Fascinating. All right, now let's see. We talked already 45 minutes about this. These are endless. This is 400 of these. One can, of course, enjoy that. I have myself, since a long time, I have a little book. This is in Swedish choirs, and you can just open it, and just look at it. And this is somehow, I think, very, very educational. And I think we just really start to think of harmony in this way, horizontal way. And it's something awesome. It's sort of like like a treasure. It's like looking at some very, very awesome, fantastic picture by Rembrandt, or something like that, but in miniature. In these links here, if you want to dig more in this and enjoy these, there's also another one here. And I want to, before we move on here, I want to also give a little bit of a brief touch on the subject about the texts too. And now as we understand, these chorales were not written by Bach, and the text also, but these chorales in themselves did follow to some degree a rule kind of concept. And if anyone wants to know more about that, there is a book called I can't find out. It's called Musica Poetico. All right, that explains the very fundamentals, situation in which Bach and other Baroque composers were creating in. And let's have now a little bit look here. Of course, we have Franz here is going to give us some expert translations here. Okay, this is obviously very religious. So, oh God and Lord.
Oh, shall I translate?
Please.
Yes. O God and Lord, how big and heavy are my sins which I did. There is nobody who can help, who is to find in this world. That's it.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's a lot of symbol. Well, obviously it's very important to say God and Lord. God especially is only one. This is very important in this context. Okay. Also, the third is more holy beat. And you see, obviously, but it's also about language, of course. It's not just theology. And see here, for example, this schwer. It's not on a one, for example. Sorry, this is not really the point, but I wanted to point out this word, for example, no one, right? Again, it's on a third. Such a word, as I understand, also the word world, here, Welt, should also not be on a one, I think. So there are I'm not a really expert.
No, the thing is, it's in dieser Welt. This world is emphasized.
Right, that is true. And so that's also about language. We kind of also, yeah, I thought it was worth mentioning that. And this is not so obvious in these small, but this is also more obvious in some larger works, also by Handel and Bach, how sometimes the wording is kind of a little bit, there's some superstition, as I understand. But I just wanted to touch that briefly. If somebody wants to know more about that, it's in that book, Musica Poetica. All right. Maybe that was a little bit. Let's close that now. Too advanced. Now, we already talked about that before. How these concept of chorales now, all right, also appears in other places, all right? So, and we talked about the choral preludes, and suitably, we're going to take the moment here and with this very same chorale, which we just have here, we're now going to look at his choral prelude, okay? And it's not so that it appears really anytime soon, the actual chorale, but there's all kinds of sort of contemplations about this chorale probably. And on the second page, it does appear, but very hidden. All right, not even in the same. It's like shifted sequence, but it does appear snippets of it here. And I chose to have this edition here because this CH here is when it appears, so we can easily follow that. And I thought we could just sort of let this sink in a little bit. How about we just listen to that? Oh, sorry, we're gonna have to do that again. Pretty awesome. So, turn back to microphone. So, what did we have here? Well, basically, this whole intro here is incredibly mysterious, isn't it? With this very kind of almost kind of a odd side of Bach we hear here. I think it is really a lot of mystique, which that mystique, of course, was a little bit more. So this is a more of a kind of maybe a conservative draw, and it's also based on now this hymn, and then almost feels a little bit more Catholic somehow, to sort of that darkness. And then after that, basically what he did, so what this is really is, we talked about intros a few times, and this is all just a very long intro to singing this chorale, right? So he's very beautifully then made a little semi-fugue, a fugetta, or what do you call it, or something like that, where he does these entries here of little snippets. So he's like preparing the audience a little bit for this chorale, getting in. And you see, that's why I like this addition here. You see, here it starts here, just like a echo. Right? See, and there comes C here. Quite awesome. Not really like you really hear it, but it's obviously kind of. Oh, this is also last week we talked about expansion. This is a very good example of how he's taking little snippets and made much more music out of it. All right. But of course, still, this is all just really four-part harmony entirely the whole way throughout. I don't know if you thought about that, but this is the other thing about it. It is just like a more advanced level of that four-part harmony system. All right, fantastic. I and then so it will be if we played without everything else. So then we'll go. And then you can if you want to fiddle with this or listen to this again in this PDF I sent you. You have this here, and of course there's like an endless kind of discovery to be made here with all the different organ preludes and so on. But yet I know I think last time, Kenny, we were talking about excuse me, the about series or sequels, or well, obviously this is another example of a true sequel. You know, he's the Chorale Preloads, right? But so in some ways they have a lot in common, but each of them, if we study them in detail, each of them will yet be unique and have its own little features and stories and its own little universe. And okay, thank you so much. I hope that you enjoyed this. Any so we can have like a bit of a questions here, or anyone wants to say anything before we then later move on to look at our pieces.
I have just a little observation. You know, Franz said, how did they know how to do it, or what they were doing? But it's like language, that it's just what sounds right in your cultural thing. So if you are from even a region, the way that you talk, people can tell if you're from in the other region, if you're from some other region, because you say something different, you use different words or different inflection level, or if English, the language is a second language, you don't speak like a native. But if you just live with this music, you're like a native speaker, and so you just hear it, and you hear when it's wrong, because you're just immersed in it. And even listening to these chorales, that I recognize that in the writing that I'm doing now, I don't modulate as easy as this stuff, but it's like I'm writing, like, say, well, that note sounds right and that note sounds wrong. It's so you got to choose the one that sounds right, and that's how that I realized that I got that influence from listening to Bach when I was young, and so still writing from those influences and staying within that language, or that even dialect. It's a dialect even. Anyway, that's just what I was thinking as I was listening. Say, this sounds so familiar. And
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I mean, it's also in one degree, it is a development, because it wasn't like none of this wasn't done before. I mean, the concept of four-part harmony wasn't invented by Bach, but it was sort of this unsurpassed kind of development of this, and kind of clarification, and almost like, let's say, perfection And sometimes we can also, I think, to some degree, it's also about discovery, because these things, and if we do talk about things like parallel fifths, parallel octaves, etc., it's a phenomenon, because as soon as you would have a fifth in the middle of there, it just ruins this constant polyphonic movement. We can for fun, for example, we could for fun add some, for example, parallel fifths to this beautiful chorale and see what happens. If that is of interest to anyone, we could I think easily do that. So yes, it's a language, but it's also a language, but it's also a very, very it's kind of an abstraction, and I think it's also a discovery to some degree. That's how I look at it, at least. You know what I mean? There's also this phenomena of how just notes operate together. Earlier we looked at spectral analysis. They didn't have that then, but to some degree, this is still what we're talking about, that certain things we do have an effect of the sort of spectral sonority of it. What did I want to say? Let's go to here, for example. If we talked about, quite interesting, there was, oh, let's actually look at the first one. Because here we have a lot of let's go to that one. So for example, for fun, we could literally do for example, right here, right? I could do that. All right, then I do get, and do this, and then you can a little bit hear it. It's the same, the reason why parallel fifth, for example, it's very powerful. It's also known as a power chord. And of course, in Gregorian chant, for example, it was a practice to sing in parallel fifths. It's very powerful because it's united, and that's actually, so that's then, as soon as you have that, we ruin the kind of true polyphonic sensation. A little hard to hear, maybe. Again, if you can try it out or on the piano, but to some degree we can also, let's say we take out the soprano, or I take out the alto. It sounds very kind of, all of a sudden it sounds like medieval, and we need some sort of forts and stone castles and knights. I don't know, that's what I feel when we get to the parallel fifth. It's just sort of it's very much out of the style, and as you see, what he did here was so very brilliant and so very beautiful. Wow, it's just it's a little bit hard to not notice why that is just so much better. I don't know, or am I maybe just being too indoctrinated? I mean, listen to this with, and of course now it happens to be on the guitar that we can use the open D, so we can play like this. It's quite nice. And still not in tune, but instead of the other one. You almost, if you would have this in a choir, all of a sudden it would be like those two notes all of a sudden really stick out. And of course, that is when we do move further on in music history. And to be honest, I think there might even exist some very rare example of Bach using a parallel fifth, and that was in order to emphasizing something very strong, right, in context. And of course, you have the very famous Mozart Fifths. Which is something Mozart did, where he used an augmented sixth chord towards something, and then you get a parallel fifth, which some people said Oh, this. Some people just said simply Mozart must have made a mistake. Cannot be. It's so disgraceful. So sort of. Let's say basically in this context, this became taboo, right? So, this is also philosophy, of course, but to define culture or even society that is based on taboos. For example, there was early experimentation in the Greek societies where they invented strange taboos, such as you're not allowed to watch a candle in a mirror, things like that, which doesn't really make it have any sense, but define them as a culture. They were not allowed to watch candles in a mirror. So, but in this case, it has a reason too. It became taboo, but then of course in the context of Mozart, then became a known fact and accepted eventually. And you even see that in some guitar repertoire, you can see the use of Mozart Fifths for sure, very consciously. Because it was something, it's like in the court in America or anywhere, once you had a certain case that was one, and then you can use that as, but can argue for the use of something. But generally speaking, we just in this style we don't have parallel fifths and octaves. All right, for fun we could do another one. For example, here is where my D's were missing. Okay. Here, for example, it's a very good example. There's a C here, which is, by the way, what a great chord. Whoa. This chord here, which is it's a C here with that C6, but it's what makes it special is this very special context where it now goes to the here. For example, if we would move this to a D, then yes, we would now sorry. Never mind. We'll move on. You can move notes here, and then you see why the ones that are there are good. Anyway, thank you so much. Let's now. Thank you so much for paying attention to there. Why is this interesting for guitar composers? It may seem tremendously remote from what we're doing, perhaps, and I guess that's also kind of the beauty of it, that it is very remote, and that we can study a system like that and sort of be charmed by it and sort of sense it, feel it, get influenced by it. Beautiful, beautiful. Of course, what happens sometimes is that composition students, they get so fed up with this, and then sometimes you can do also, for fun, you can do invent your own system and do the opposite. For example, you're never allowed to have this. You can turn all the rules completely upside down. Like you're never allowed to resolve the 4. You're never allowed to have a consonant on a beat. You have to have the dissonance. So that could also be a way. Then you just to kind of get it out of your system if it gets frustrating to do that. Now, do we need to become experts in this? I would say no, not at all. But if you're somehow feel like it or feel inspired by that, it's always very nice, even just to listen to it, or to look at more YouTube videos about it, or do personally, for me, what is the nicest, what makes the most sense is to do what I just did here and just write it out for guitar and then play it. All right, beautiful. And to be honest, already here I can find many nice things, like this is an unusual chord, but it works on guitar, so we can use this somewhere. Anyway, Fernando, I see you're ready there. You have now progressed with your
Yeah.
flow piece.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Mm. So the first 12 measures are the same that we worked out previously.
Mhm.
And from the 13th measure, I remember I did only like 4 measures of that texture, of that section. So I extended it to like 8 measures and then 8 more measures, a total of 16 measures.
Beautiful.
So
Yeah, it looks great.
and
I like the look of this. Looks cool.
so it's basically the same melody goes on for 8 measures, and for the next 8 measures it goes down an octave, like like that. And after that, there's like 2 bars of this build up going on. Sorry, based off that pattern you showed last
Super.
session. And from that point onward, it sort of goes into a new place, like
Nice.
something like this. So yeah.
All right. No, looking great. I like the look of this. I mean, this also kind of I mean, it's very flexible. You can repeat 1, 2 times. You can go on. That's, as I see it, it could also, kind of be a type of improvisation piece where you're even, it wouldn't matter maybe that section. It could be done in many ways, right? So then I don't know exactly what to, I would just go on. I like this, there's and there's a kind of rawness to it, which is good. That is a part of the style that we discussed with this bowl music that I think works super well. We mentioned that last week also. Of course, you can look at ways to vary. Now you're always using that open strings there. Is there other open strings or other notes that can be used? You have it low here and you have high, so that's awesome. Could it go higher? Could it go lower? I don't know. What do you want to do with it? Do you want to grow it? Do you want to accelerate it? Should it stay a little bit like this? Should it have a contrasting theme or movement? That is all possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, or do you have a plan now, or you're just kind of a little bit waiting?
So far, the last plan was that to basically have these textures and work out like more melody or improvisations based on this same texture. But would be nice, definitely, to figure out newer textures, to be honest.
Yeah, so that's a little bit what we talked about last time, is the stage of creating, even if you just do it in your mind, creating ideas of different ways that you can use this. Sort of like, in earlier example, we had Bach using extracts of this chorale to make a fugue, for example, as another, as an idea that he came up with. I think that, but then let's say if you're now, even if you're still doing that, that's fine. But I would then say that now a little bit the next step that can be powerful is to look for some kind of, I would call it sort of a narrative, and that even if it's a more abstract narrative, such as it's getting loud and then getting soft again, or it could be even more something that really inspires. It can even be like a story, or something where you want to do something with the narrative. Do you want it to get quiet? Do you want the rhythm to stop, or shall it go on? Or will the rhythm change is this narrative sort of a kind of a similar feeling the whole way, or is there going to be a change in some way? And is that change then, is that a gradual change, or is a sudden change? And sometimes I feel, at least, that without a narrative, I get a little lost. So that's where I like to. I have on my piece, I always use a lot of different working titles. And now flow is a cool title, but right now maybe that would be the idea of, well, flow, but then you can go anywhere. But you know, one could say, is this a distant flow, or is it a gradual flow, or is it a demonic flow, or is this a ecstatic flow, or is this a flow with sunshine, or is the flow and tonic? Is it? Or are there other thoughts, you know, that is there, like you know, are there any sceneries? Is there the bowl singing on the field and about the turning of the universe? I don't know. Is it about lost? Yeah. Sometimes I when I'm working on pieces, I almost wish I could like just like have like a group of people and like a questionnaire. So like if I came up with some music, I would like to just them to hear it, to see their reaction, and then I could decide what to do with the music. Because, see what I mean? Like, you know, I sometimes wonder that. So like imagine we just heard this, and then people had to fill in different what they thought is, you know, this and that, and then you would get some kind of picture of how people experience that, and then I would know a little bit what to do with it. Right? So I think at this moment, saying that, I mean, we talked about you can always think endlessly about different variations. Okay, you already have here, you have a, you know, and then you have this one with a long bass. I think now at this moment, having a narrative, then it will be a little bit more easy for you to know how to go on about it. Sometimes you can even just pick, for example, a story from Bengal literature, some Baul story, or one of your stories, or it can be very literal, and you can draw upon it, you know, like a Chinese whisper, flow with you know, and that is a kind of a nice process. That's very fun also. So now you have the music, you have a little bit some ideas about what can be done with it. Now it's a good moment to think now what you want to do with it in time and space. And sometimes you can have a clearer picture. Sometimes I'm a little bit more like, I know that I want to go here, okay, but I don't really know what I'm going to do after that, because to be honest, sometimes I'm a little bit reluctant on, let's see how this turns out. All right. So if I'm working on, let's say, one section, although I have some ideas what I could do after, but sometimes maybe it's more clear, but sometimes I really feel the need to complete one section a little bit, and then I see now what did I actually come up with, and you know, so there's a kind of also a dynamic to that plan that is absolutely not written in stone, but stories are great. So if you come up with a story, I think you can easily, you know.
Another idea I had, but I still haven't thought about a narrative. But that's a very important point you brought up, actually, and thank you for that. Definitely having a sketch of a narrative will help me figure out where to go. Like one of the things for me, I never really think of a story when writing music, but I think that this is something to keep in mind from now on. I usually think more about, I just go with the with the gut feelings. And if
No,
I'm
no,
lost, I just
yeah.
figure out a new texture or something, and I often jump into something new. And that's maybe that's something you notice. I tend to jump
Well,
from one idea to another.
you don't have to have you know, this is very personal. You don't have to have like, I'm not talking it has to be programmatic, but as you're working with something, maybe it is pure music, but you can use that to draw a little bit. And in your case, there's already so much there with all this cultural reference to the bowels. So there's such a very much there already that you can draw upon, that you can allow yourself to be inspired by, you know.
Right.
For example, there was I wrote a guitar duo, and it was called "When Buds Are Breaking," which is a quote from a poem, and that was really useful for me. Although that wasn't, I think, the very first title, but as soon as I had started, it became very important for me to. That helped me. So so the full quote is, "Oh, when buds are no. Oh, it hurts when buds are breaking." And then it says, "Why would otherwise springtime halter?" All right. So it's the concept of a bud, and we know if you stare at the flower all day, that it seems like it never grows. And there's a kind of metaphor, of course, of the bud being transition, and to some degree that is a certain painfulness. But to be honest, in my piece, it wasn't so much about the pain. So in the end, I just used "When Buds Are Breaking" because it wasn't so much about the pain, but it was more about the idea of this kind of reaching development. So all of these sections, in the end, there are 4, but they're all doing all kind of in this mood of reaching for something, right? And that helped me a lot to focus my ideas. So you can also look at the narrative. It's abstract, but we're trying to figure out, maybe you have an intuitive sense of it. So now we're helping ourselves a little bit by talking a little bit more, okay? Otherwise, and I think once you have that, then it's quite easy to make up your mind. All right. Otherwise, you can also work with way more abstract forms. You can, for example, we can talk about form. We talked a lot about rondo form, ABA form. You can variation form. You can use all kinds of forms, all right? But you can also have something that is a little bit less technical. Right? It can be maybe push you. Often it's about when you make up your mind about something, then then it's finished. Then it will fall out. The process is to make up your mind what you want to do. This is what takes time. And the power, and that's also why in such a seminar, it's always nice when people send things that are not finished, because by the time it's finished, it's like you already made up your mind. But before you have that, I think, or composition teaching makes sense mostly, other than just studying 4-part harmony. That is maybe the best composition teacher there is. Is Franz left or what? He had a piece here.
Yeah, he wrote. He has back
next
pain.
time. Well, then let's have a little bit more look on what you did here. To be honest, I'm liking what I'm seeing, and I think that you're on a really good way here. And I don't want to kind of stop you too much. I would, to some degree, just continue. play with the octaves. I mentioned that last time too. Now we don't need this phrase here. Same one. I'm just. This is the original. And now I did it. And then. This is nice, high up. Are you a good improviser, Nando? Do you like improvising?
I really like improvising.
I would just go crazy on improvisation, you know, it's like minimum, sit down, have to improvise for 1 hour. All of this melodies here. Record it, see what happens.
That's mostly how I come up with this. Like,
yeah, then just do that more, maybe. Just do more. And you will have all these little pieces. And like, wow, just put them together in a beautiful necklace and everyone will love it.
I love
how you can break free. You can also you can break free in sequences. This style, I think that's very nice to do. Maybe you can do more. You can do some slightly off modes.
Okay. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
That's the kind of spice that then there's nothing. If you change octaves, you can, and you change, even if you just keep that same monotonous accompaniment, sort of like Asturias like almost, by changing octaves, by changing a little bit of mode, you can fill a lot of room. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's what you need to think about here. There's no continuous perpetuous motion. In the beginning, here it is. Then are you going to stay like that for the rest of the piece, or are you going to disintegrate that? Or are you going to use another? This is the kind of, or are you going to go away from it again into a more free landscape? Or do you want to kind of boost this up? I mean, you can also just with strumming, for example, right? Talked about parallel fifths so much today, but you can. It's possible just with this little materials. You could do very, very long, exciting compositions and improvisations.
Yeah.
How much can something be repeated? You know, that's the question. For example, just extracting more summarization. I need to cook this soup, make it shorter. What do you say? When you know the stock, you can also make it thicker and have less, and that's the kind of you could, because this melody is quite moving around, it moves on. It can also be a moment in the piece that just stays more like. You can move into real minimalism. The rhythm, for example, can be like a tabla solo. It's just about the rhythm all of a sudden. You can also minimize like that, zoom in, and expand. And that is what, you see, this is improvisation. That's what I really mean when sitting down for an hour, just without even daring to put in any other material than you already have, unless it just happens by mistake. Then you can deal with it. All right? How long can you sit on something? This, I mean, I wouldn't write probably. I mean, in improvisation, I would definitely do something. I probably wouldn't really write a piece like that. Like, I wouldn't really take the time to. I mean, it could be a section. To create such a, this I do very often in my pieces. Just very, very slow, gradual. Because you have music moving around, is sometimes you just freeze it a little bit. Then you have this kind of incredible anticipation going on. This we hear, of course, also in Beethoven, actually. That classic section in the Sixth Symphony where there's this longest repetition in history at that time or something before minimalism. Do you know which one I mean? You can, that it's just repeating, you know, like that is, can also be like, wow, like we're just, what's gonna happen, you know, something's gonna blow up soon or what, like what's gonna happen, you know. Sounds like starting to worry a little bit, you know. Is he like, has he lost his mind, you know, what's wrong with him? Oh, that was nice, you know. And improvisation is really the room to do that, to anticipate, to train yourself, like your stamina, let's say, in expanding something. It creates, I mean, this is the one most difficult thing about becoming a true raga master, of course, is that to be able to have that stamina to do that close, it can be hours long, you know, improvisations. It's not something, mind gets tired, fingers gets tired, your legs are, you know, falling off. And there you are, needing to go through with the improvisation. You know, this is the, again, narrative. Why is the Indian music is so interesting is because it has this very fixed narrative of the 4 parts, right? That is incredible, and we know that. We don't know how long the alap is going to be. We don't know exactly. We have decided this the raga. Yes, that's the, now the raga goddess is looking over you and will punish you if you go out of the scale. And you have the, but you know, they can also be different tals in the different sections, but you know that the speed is always going to, so there is a kind of sense of that, you know, that's why it works so well, you know. It can't just be, you know, oh, should we do, you know. And that's, again, that's the narrative that if you have it, it's easy. You could use such a narrative from slow to fast, but maybe you want slow fast to something completely different, maybe something very quiet and small, and then grow again, and maybe, you know, work on surprise, you know? And this, that when we do it with improvisation is more liberating, because we don't have to be so, it doesn't have to be so good. And you know, there's, and you can allow yourself to really draw on time, and that's the exciting thing about improvisation, I find, is that we don't know what's going to happen really, and that's, oh look, now we're drawing and time is stopping or is moving fast, or in the sequence of events, is it happening quickly or so far you stay yourself. Now I'm not so exactly sure about the bal music, but I think there is some, and if you listen more in detail to bal music, there is some more polyrhythm also in the percussion. And to be honest, all of the bowls do not do, say, T-highs, but one can have also alternative ways to create T-high-like end to sections where you can...
What's the high?
when you repeat something 3 times, or the equivalent of a cadence. For example, there I went into triplets. Sorry, and then that was triplets. So you can also think about that as after staying in the 16ths, you can also introduce faster values. If that's very powerful, the narrative is to expand, get faster, get more intense. You know, this figure, bum bum bum, can also, or the 16 is 32s, or triplets. An alternative room for that, of course, creates this little extra fast and nice entertainment. Nice little bit. Dim bum, dim bum, bim bum, ding, tick, tick. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. The triplets. 1 2 2 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 2 2. 5 6 7, all kinds of things. Disruptive rhythmical patterns. In your improvisation, it's very useful.
Yeah.
Just go for it. And I think pretty much this is the way to go on about this. I mean, it is a well-known fact that Carlo Domeniconi, his Koyumbaba, he was drilling on it, I think, for 10 years, right? And it was basically started as some kind of improvisation and something he came back to, and had many versions. And it was really just kind of a bunch of improvisations that eventually became, you know, as I understand.
Okay. Well, it took 10 years to finish.
I think so, something like that. I don't know.
Wow.
It was something he had grind on for a time. You know, that's the stories I understand. You can maybe find on the internet. There's some interviews maybe about that. But don't take that a long time. I mean, but this is the improvisation. I think improvisation as a tool is tremendously important. And even if you're not good at it, you can, I mean, Ian also with his guitar, I know you've also been now, we haven't seen anything from you in a while, but you're also doing improvisations on your 10-string guitar, right? And how is that going? Are you enjoying that?
Yeah.
The neighbors?
Yeah, it's pretty fun, but I didn't have anything like very complete.
Well, that doesn't really matter in the sense of if we're training improvisation, you know, it's just something we have to do. And the more you do it, things just start happening. All right? That is something.
Hopefully.
Well, in that case, since we are on improvisation, I'm going to share with you something very far out. By, of course, Bach. My God, it's not to be rude, but it was a little bit like everything. Music really wasn't that interesting before Bach. I don't know if you agree with me. Of course, there's some very beautiful older music, but it's just after that everything starts getting really exciting. Right? It has contrast. It has different, you know. So, but the other guy, of course, to me, that it's another favorite of mine is, of course, called Heinz Stockhausen, which you know, but not just for his music so much, maybe as just his way of thinking about it. Okay, and there's he wrote a series of compositions that was called 7 Days. Okay. And this is aus den 7 Tagen, right? And this is, must understand that previous to this, he was mostly known as, somebody who would do very complicated things that were very complex to some degree, not as complex as Ferneyhough or something like that, but it was also later. But then to contrast is very, very, we have another, I'm going to share this with you, something crazy that you've never seen before. And when we talk about improvisation, okay? We talk about improvisation, but he said he wanted to take it one step further, okay? And he not improvise new music, but intuitive music. And what's the difference? Well, in improvisation, you improvise in the style of something, like you improvise in jazz, or you improvise in the style of raga, or now Anando, I want him to improvise in the style of his piece, to see what, to give it some room. But let's have a look at this. This is actually a score. If you want to buy the whole thing here, it costs $24. So, but it's not much to buy because it's just pictures. Anyway, and this is one of these pages. There are only 7 pages, so a little bit expensive on the score there, but maybe it's a very, very nice book. And for ensemble, check this out, unlimited. And these are the sole instructions. Play a sound with the certainty that you have an infinite amount of time and space. All right, and then there's a line here that goes outside of the paper. So for infinite amount of time and space, this we know this cannot really be perceived for human beings. Let's say, so amount of time that can expand way beyond your own life, hundreds of years, or space that goes the entire cosmos. So this is quite difficult. It needs quite some mental preparation, right? To contemplate this with certainty. So you need to, it acts as a very difficult piece to play, because you have to really, for your mind, so you have to convince yourself, set yourself in that mindset that there is an infinite amount of time and space, and then play, and then you will play in a way you never ever have played before, basically, if you can go into this. All right, this is something quite incredible. I would actually let's see if I can, because I didn't buy this, so I'm gonna rip these off of the internet. Oh, I like this one. Oh, see, I even got here like a reported here. No, I want English. No. Nachtmusik, night music. So of course, obviously very inspired by Mozart and the Eine kleine Nachtmusik. I don't know, but it's the same thing. Basically, it's a nocturne. You could say it's a modern version of a nocturne. Play a vibration in the rhythm of the universe. Play a vibration in the rhythm of dreaming. Play a vibration in the rhythm of dreaming and slowly transform it into the rhythm of the universe. Repeat this as often as you can. So vibration, sound, any sound is a vibration. Play a vibration, but in the rhythm. What is the rhythm of the universe? And what's the difference between the rhythm of dreaming, of reality, and, right? But I mean, somehow it makes sense, right? There's a different rhythm in our dream than it is in the universe. Play a vibration in the rhythm of dreaming and slowly transform it in the rhythm of the universe. So the dream is in Very fascinating. I think already just reading this, I can almost hear music. I don't know about you guys, but and the interesting thing about these is that they performed them, of course. He had them performed several times, and then he would analyze these performances, and there was, of course, certain things that that reoccurred, right? And now I know there is another one that I think I can play it by heart because I memorized. I think it said, play. I forgot. Let's find it. Yes, it was very complicated. No, we need to find it because it's, yeah, this one. This is if you have compositions, excuse me, that is extremely difficult to play. It's called Gold Dust, and to begin with here, this is quite almost dangerous. It can be life-threatening. Live completely alone for 4 days without food, but luckily we can have water. In complete silence, without much movement, sleep as little as necessary, think as little as possible. After 4 days, late at night, without conversation beforehand, play single sounds. Without thinking which you are playing. Close your eyes, just listen. So this, it almost seems an impossibility. Already in this we have a kind of dilemma, which is, can we play without thinking? Good question, right? And this is basically just, so this work is completely kind of changing everything. And now, before we go on with our lives, we're just gonna listen a little bit to this composition. I've had this a little bit on the waiting, and I want to, anyone who is on, I think you can also find this on YouTube. It's not maybe something to really listen to, but it's fascinating. I think you can just no, sorry, like this. What? No, I think unfortunately, yeah, I think there are somewhere on. Oh man. Nope. You can check that on YouTube. Anyway, this is maybe more to think about than to listen. And I think this is really interesting as a perspective to improvisation, because we got very jammed into this idea of improvising in some style, let's say, and we get constantly inhibited by our thoughts, saying that it wasn't good or it wasn't right, as we're improvising, right? It's very common, and it kind of gets discouraged by that a little bit because it sounds terrible. But it only sounds terrible because you're looking with the glasses of a certain style, let's say. So what in this concept, intuitive, so you take out the glasses of any kind, and now we're creating a new set of rules. And as you imagine here, so the only wrong, you can only play wrong note if you're playing while thinking. And then there's another movement where also there's also other experiments. So also the idea you can, and if you start thinking, you have to immediately stop, for example. That's another movement. All right? So if many people are playing and somebody does something very dramatic, all of a sudden they will catch their mind and they'll all stop playing because you're not allowed to play while you're thinking. So I think this is kind of as a little improvisation, inspiration for dealing with improvisation. As a says, it's really not about trying to play the right notes. It's really about trying to pervade something bigger. So this is again what I a little bit mean with a narrative. For an improvisation can also be like that. You can simply say, I'm going to improvise about a story I know, or I'm going to first play very slowly and then I'm going to play very loudly and ugly, and then I'm going to go to G major, and then after that I'm going to break my guitar. All right, this is a little plan. It's like a narrative, and then there you go. Or like this is fantastic. Just have absolutely cannot think at all. Have to. So ultimately Stockhausen he wanted to touch this intangible thing which we call the creation and inspiration, and we all know that how much we think that somehow there is some other. Of course, he became very, very far out spiritual, and he used to say that he came from Sirius and that he was from another planet, and there was anyway. I hope we can think about those. If anyone's interested, you can just check out 7 Days, all right, by Stockhausen and you can probably, if you don't want to pay 24 euros for that 7 little drawings, and they are all online because it's not, it's priceless anyway. And you can also
might as well buy it, even just for, I don't know,
oh yeah, to keep it on. No, and I mean Stockhausen still, the organization behind they also, I mean, he has these wonderful pieces that are written for music boxes that is following the cyclus of the star signs, all right? And of course they did this beautiful, you buy these, you have to buy, and they play, each music box play one piece. It is so nice. And yes, score such things. So I mean, he's maybe the only one within contemporary classical music that did something a little bit towards that. Like people really bought these very expensive music boxes. I think they were pretty rich by the end. All right. Well, you guys, I wish you a fantastic day or night, and look forward to next time.
Yeah, it was a great session.
Oh, I hope you enjoyed the Bach talking.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
All right.